Please welcome Darren Shou, Head of Technology at NortonLifeLock.
No break for you guys. Oh, wow, that's a big picture. All right, we'll just get started. So I'm Darren Shou. I'm CTO of NortonLifeLock. And it's interesting because what does a CTO do? And it's different whether you're at a technology company or maybe a manufacturing company. It's fun being a CTO at a technology company because I get to expose myself to a lot of breadth and the depth through the various labs that we have and really thinking about the technology strategy. Today I want to talk to you though about privacy. And I'm really going to focus on what privacy means and the privacy paradox and what we can do about it. So sometimes I like to think about privacy as a glass house. And the old saying, what is it? Sing like nobody's listening, dance like nobody's watching. What does that really mean, to dance like nobody's watching? I was thinking about that the other day. And I have dance parties. I have a 7-year-old daughter. You heard about her being in the Girl Scouts. So we have dance parties. And I'm really fortunate that there are blinds, right? This technology called curtains that are amazing. Because if my neighbors saw my dance moves, I would be terrified. It's generally about here. It's in this position here. But I want to be expressive. I want to be creative. I want to empower my daughter to have those wonderful moments and try out all these great dance moves. But when we think about privacy, and we often define it as like freedom from observation, that's why I say dance like nobody's watching. Let me ask you guys a question first. Why do we have locks on the inside of our houses? I get why we have locks on the outside of houses from a security point of view. Why do we have locks on the inside of our houses? Now, I know a few of you guys are CISOs and CIOs and stuff like that. It is not about defense in depth. That might have been the first answer for a guy like George. Yes, thanks. It's not about defense. It could be about defense in depth, but it's often about, there's times where you want to have a space where you can feel safe, right? It's a feeling of being free from judgment. It's a feeling of being able to have control, right? And that feeling of control comes from how we can set these spaces up. But I understand the defense in depth as well. So what if we were at this house, and this is not my house, it's too close to the water, but it would be lovely if I was there. I can only imagine. But also imagine that you're in this house. You're with your friends, you're with your family, and there are 177 people pressed up against the windows of this house, and they're all looking at everything you do. Maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not. And what if they're looking at everything that your family's doing? What if they're looking at everything you're doing? So when we did a survey recently, a measurement survey, we found that the average person, our average consumer, encounters 177 different tracking entities, not trackers. I'm not saying that they encounter 177 cookies on average a week, but 177 entities are observing their behaviors, learning their beliefs, and really trying to understand them better. In many ways, that can be benevolent. But what I'm here to talk about is how that we get control back. Because some of the largest trackers know half of the browsing history for almost all the users. And some of the larger trackers even understand more of that. And this digital exhaust that I have, the digital breadcrumbs of my life, tell a very, well, I hope it's an interesting story, but it definitely tells a story. It tells a story about really what distinguishes me as a person, as an individual. And it showcases my beliefs, my concerns, my worries, my hopes, right? What I want the future to hold for myself, for my family. And it's really those collections of things that, as a summation, don't make my identity, but largely inform my identity. My identity is really the flip side of privacy. It's kind of two sides of the same coin. On one side, I have that which I am, that which I profess to be, that which I hope to be. And on the other side of it are all the ways in which I can control access to that information. And it's multifaceted. If I'm an Uber driver, I may want to amplify the fact that I have a clean driving record. If I'm a physician, I may want to project that I have my medical license. So privacy, I think, is often misconstrued as how do I hide things? How do I keep things private, right? It's that connotation of that word. But in many cases, it's about selective control. How can I present who gets access to what information about me, when, and for what purpose? And as we've been on this really roller coaster in terms of acceleration, I think more and more about how we can hand back more controls back into the hands of the consumer, back into the hands of a person. And I think that's really, really what I want to do. But there's one other element about this. It's not just about people looking inside the house and seeing who I am and what I'm doing, but it's also changing what I see when I look throughout the other side of the mirror, right? Through the other lens. We did this experiment in the labs. Like I mentioned, I've got this great group of labs, Norton Labs, and the folks did something called the privacy mirror. The privacy mirror was an experiment in which they set up, and by the way, this is when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, so this was about 7 years ago. And so, and this will make sense in a second why I said that. We were doing this experiment where every time I browsed, it would set up another headless browser, right? So I would make a searching decision, like what's the best stroller in the world? And then another browser would spin up and look at what's the best car in the world. And I would keep going down this branch until we had about 1,000 or so different browsers spinning up, each taking a different branch in the road. And what was really interesting about this, and we would do it on a split screen, is it would show on one path, the path that I chose, how the world around me was being shaped and morphed. A lot of it was very interesting, right? I was getting a ton of information, not just about strollers, but also about diapers and all sorts of other cool things that are going to be useful as I was entering into first-time fatherhood. On the other hand, all the other browsers were seeing a different world, and two things really stood out to me. It wasn't just the ads, but it was also the content. The headlines were changing subtly on some of the stories I was reading. The things that were being pitched to me on social media were different. And then often, in some cases, I was getting exposed. When we ran this in 2020 during the election, we were seeing more and more disinformation campaigns as well. So it's not just about who is observing me, but how they're shaping the world in which I live in as well. So what can you do about it? Obviously, in the physical world, I'm sorry, I love this picture. In the physical world, you can go to some lengths, right? You know, we all know someone who's paying cash at the gas station still, or trying to during COVID. You can try to hide your stuff online. I actually think it's a different thing. I don't think privacy is about hiding, and it's really about controlling. There are many cases where I want to have that benefit of all the technologies that are going to make my life easier, whether it's a smart listening device in my home, or it's helping me find what I want quickly, right? But what I'm thinking about here is, what can we do about the privacy paradox? The privacy paradox talks about and this is a term coined around 2001. I should give the attribution, but I can't remember the exact name of the study. I was looking at online shopping habits. And what they found, though, in the study was that what people profess to be their privacy beliefs, there was a wide chasm, a big gap between their professed beliefs and the actions, behaviors they took online. And I think at the time in 2001, they basically would trade a lot of their information for about the price of a Big Mac, or just in general for, free food. And so that got me thinking about what that really could be. How could we close that gap? And, I talk about my daughter a lot, and she was, when she was starting soccer for pre-pandemic, she's out there running around in regular sneakers and everything. And it's fun, and they're slipping, and it's kind of like, what do they call that? Where they all gather together. It's kind of like the meatball soccer, the beehive soccer, where everybody runs the ball, and then they're all around the ball together. It's very cute. There's a lot of tripping. There's a lot of slipping. And so there's some things you can do about that. I kept thinking about soccer cleats. I remember when the first time we bought her soccer cleats after COVID, and it was amazing to see how empowered she was, right? When she could plant her foot and take that big shot. When she could go from 0 to, I don't know how fast she's running, I'm just going to say 60, 0 to 60, when she is taking off from the line from the backfield to go score that. It's fun to see how any technology that we have can be used to really give someone something better, to make their lives better. And that's how technology is too. I know I'm taking something low tech here with with soccer cleats, right? And fortunately, I didn't show too many brands in this shot, but there's so much that can be done. And I want the same thing to be true when we go online, when we live our digital lives, right? We're just getting back to soccer, but we're doing so much more online. So what can we do here? One of the technologies, I'll just tell you a story about what my team was looking at once. So what we were thinking about is facial recognition, right? So if we were to kind of go back to this story here, so much of during the pandemic, I was using my face to log in as a biometric identifier. I was using it to buy things online. I was using it to log in for work. And I was also consulting with governments on how they could use it for democratic and free elections. So there was a lot of thinking around facial recognition. And we first started thinking about it in terms of, well, geez, is it secure? But quickly that turned to also, is it private? And some of the things that came out of that was a learning about how the technology that creates facial recognition, so using machine learning, there's all sorts of different ways you can do facial recognition, how we can use that to give back privacy as well. And we thought about how can we give someone back a cloak of invisibility? Maybe not all the time, but just when they want to be invisible, when they want that freedom, when they want that choice to be able to be anonymous and go online. And so what you can do is you can use a technique called an advanced machine learning technique called adversarial machine learning. Typically, adversarial machine learning we're looking at in terms of how can someone attack my machine learning models and how can I defend them? But it turns out with adversarial machine learning, I can take a selfie, and just as simple in the user's hands as doing a filter right on Insta, I can add subtle information that is almost imperceptible to the human eye, but that subtle information is almost a layer of data that can break or deny a facial recognition's ability to classify me as me. So what does this allow me to do? It allows me to put my selfie on LinkedIn or share photos with friends, and it achieves everything I want. I want to participate, I want to build relationships, I want to build that social relations that are so important to a number of our generations, but it also keeps anybody that's scraping that data from being able to use that and identify me easier. So I'm raising the bar. Is it a solution right now? No. I mean, we just put it out there just to try it. But my message is that a number of these technologies give us hope of what is possible. Using adversarial machine learning to give back privacy, I think, is an interesting thing to do. Okay, so let's go from adversarial machine learning and facial recognition privacy to kind of a day in the life, right? We all seen something like this. But what I want to do here is talk about what we're doing today for privacy and the steps that we're hopefully taking, to also what are the steps I think that we'll be taking 5 years from now, or how those steps might be taken on behalf of us and for our benefit. So the first one is, today we're logging with passwords. Maybe not all of us, but quite a few of us are still probably managing a number of passwords, hopefully using a password manager, hopefully using some kind of multi-factor authentication like a 2FA. But in the future, and you've heard some people talk about passwordless and passwordless plus MFA, I think that's fantastic. But then you think, what next? Okay, so now I'm using my biometric identifier, who I am, some aspect about me, whether it's my face, my iris, my fingerprint, also with something I own, which gives me my MFA. But now I want to think about how I'm going to be protecting my biometric identifiers going forward. It's going to be something that I need to think about more. And I'm not saying I have the answers for that yet, but I want us to be thinking about how we protect those going forward. I need to think about the privacy as kind of a flip side of security when it comes to that. I'm going to skip ahead to the doctor visit because that was a boon. Telemedicine was a boon for people during COVID, and I think it's here to stay. And what we're doing today is any form of encryption is going to help, right? Encryption helps preserve secrets. And today that's going to be using a VPN. Tomorrow, I think it could be homomorphic encryption, which is a fancy way of saying, let's keep everything encrypted at rest. Let's keep it encrypted while it's being transmitted. But let's let the doctors, the physicians, the nurses, the scientists have access to all that data without decrypting it. That's an interesting step. Or things like differential privacy. A lot of advancements there to have all the big data science that we want, but not have to expose individual characteristics or risk being de-anonymized. I'll skip to another one. Ordering delivery dinner. How many of you guys have had to pull out your driver's license or some form of identification to do DoorDash, Instacart, Uber Eats, any of these things? It might have only been me. Thanks, Joe. That wasn't just me ordering wine during the COVID. With a nice, Italian dinner or something like that. But the idea that I had to give up so much information just to do my order delivery was great that it could happen, but I want so much more. Today, there's not as much as you can do about that, right? Maybe you had to take a picture of it and submit it to someone. And there's ways you can do that, right? So with some digital rights management. But tomorrow, there's these interesting things called like zero knowledge proofs. I know many of you might be familiar with them. For those who are not, it's a way of basically anyone proving someone to something else, proving something to someone else, like my identity or my age, without having to share the information. So it's a whole bunch of really fancy math that sits there and says, hey, look, there's a trust anchor out there. Maybe it's the DMV. And so what we can say is, yes, Darren is over the age of 21, but I don't have to give up my driver's license number, my address, my social security number, the serial number on the first blender that was a wedding gift, just to order dinner, right? Those are the things that we can get going forward, right? And so I think the big takeaway that I want is really that feeling of empowerment. And empowerment for me is like a picture like this. There's no fear here, by the way. This is like when you throw your kid up in the air. The child's not afraid, you're not afraid. You both know what's gonna happen. You're not thinking about gravity. You're not thinking about any of these kind of physics laws. You're thinking, okay, there's trust. And that's what the feeling of safety is. It's about trust. I think these technologies can bring back a number of the trust to privacy, allowing us to have all the things we want. Because the reality is, we're going to want what we want, when we want it, how we want it. We're going to want all these technology enablers, and I want them too. And I want everybody else to have them. However, I think there are small steps that we can take today, like I talked about, and then additional steps we can take in the research of technology that can allow everybody to opt in to being safe online and to having their privacy. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciated being able to speak with you today. Enjoy your lunch. That was a tough thing, being in front of lunch.